Sometimes a painting doesn't just disturb you for a moment, it follows you. Long after you've looked away, it's still there, behind your eyes, in the back of your mind. This is one of those paintings. You're looking at Story Twist, created by the artist Roberto Diaz. At first glance, it looks like a nightmare rendered in oil and flesh. But if you stay with it a little longer, if you actually allow your eyes to move slowly across the surface, you'll realize something unsettling. This isn't just horror for the sake of horror. This is a carefully constructed collapse of identity, sanity, and perhaps even faith. At the center of the painting, we see a figure with a bare, pale torso. The skin is almost classical, soft, smooth, reminiscent of Renaissance or Baroque paintings. The shoulders are turned slightly away from us, the arms drawn in, the hands gently folded as if the figure is praying or begging. If you were to crop the painting just at the shoulders, you might think this is a religious artwork, a saint in contemplation, a martyr in quiet suffering. But above this fragile, almost holy body, the human form disintegrates. Where we expect a face, we get something else entirely. Layers of flesh, fragmented faces sliding over each other, clusters of staring eyes, and mouths, too many mouths, torn into the skin, full of jagged teeth, dripping with saliva and blood. It's as if the head is no longer a single solid structure, but a swarm, a cluster of competing identities, all trying to speak, all trying to scream, all trying to devour. The first shock comes from this contrast. The body is still human. The head is not. Let's stay with the body for a moment. The figure is unclothed but not sexualized. There's no glamour, no seduction, no confidence. Instead, there is exposure, a kind of forced vulnerability. The posture of the arms and hands is crucial. The hands are held together, fingers intertwined, resting near the chest. This posture appears in religious paintings again and again, a gesture of prayer, surrender, or pleading. It suggests a person who is asking for help or forgiveness, someone who is overwhelmed, perhaps resigned. The muscles are not tense. There's no attempt to fight, to resist, to escape. The body has given up. So here we already have a powerful image, a body that still remembers how to be human, attached to a head that has become something completely inhuman. This split between the calm, almost innocent posture and the monstrous head becomes the emotional backbone of the painting. You can see wide-open eyes, rolled upward, showing too much white. Some eyes seem blind, others alert, staring in different directions, none of them making proper contact with us. This does something very specific to the viewer. As humans, we are wired to seek out faces. We want to lock onto a pair of eyes, read emotions, find an expression we can understand. But here, the artist denies us that. Every time we think we've found a face, it breaks apart into something else. Psychologically, this creates a feeling of unease and confusion. We cannot locate the person. We don't know who we're really looking at. Is this one person fractured into many, or many beings fighting over one body? This is where the title Story Twist becomes interesting. We expect a straightforward figure, one story, one identity. Instead, the image reveals a plot twist. The protagonist was never stable to begin with. Now, the mouths. They are perhaps the most violent elements in the painting. These are not just slightly distorted mouths. They are stretched beyond human anatomy, packed with long, knife-like teeth. They open not just where a mouth should be, but in places where no mouth belongs. In the cheek, at the jawline, even extending down the neck. In visual symbolism, mouths are powerful. They can stand for speech, expression, desire, consumption, aggression. In this painting, they seem to represent uncontrolled urges, things that cannot be contained, or thoughts that break out of the mind like an infection. These mouths aren't just prepared to eat. They look like they've already been feeding on the subject's own identity. You could say this is what it looks like when your inner demons stop being metaphorical and start growing teeth. Covering the head is a rounded, transparent form, like a helmet or a glass dome. This is a crucial detail. On one level, it can be read as a barrier, something that separates the subject from the outside world, a mental shield, a fragile, transparent boundary. But this shield is cracked. You can see blood along its edges, as if it has been pierced, broken, or perhaps grown through from the inside. The message is haunting. Whatever was meant to protect this mind has failed. Whatever was locked inside has burst through. You could interpret this as a failed coping mechanism, a mind that tried to contain too much pain, or a psychological defense that simply couldn't hold any longer. It's like watching a mental breakdown frozen in a single horrifying moment. There is a quiet but important religious undertone in this painting. The pose of the body and the hands resembles images of saints, martyrs, or suffering figures from Christian iconography. The lighting also supports this. The body is illuminated against a darker background, like a figure emerging from the void, highlighted by a divine spotlight. In classical religious paintings, this kind of light often symbolizes grace, holiness, or spiritual significance. Here, that reference is twisted. We have the pose of a saint, but the head of a demon. This reversal can be read in several ways. A comment on how inner suffering is hidden beneath a facade of piety or calm. A suggestion that even those who appear devout or composed might be fighting unspeakable internal battles. Or a darker take, a body praying to a god that never answered, while the mind decayed. The painting becomes almost blasphemous in its visual language, but not in a simple, edgy way. It's not mocking faith, it's portraying someone who needed salvation and didn't get it. Let's talk a bit more technically about the art itself. The composition is focused and relatively tight. The figure fills most of the frame, with very little distraction in the background. This traps us with the subject. There is nowhere else for our eyes to escape to. The lighting feels borrowed from classical oil paintings. Dark background, a single directional light source hitting the torso and parts of the face. This gives the work a painterly, almost museum-like quality, even though the subject matter is deeply modern and disturbing. There are no bright, hopeful colors here. No blue sky, no greenery, no pure white. Everything feels stained. The use of realistic skin tones anchors the horror in reality. This doesn't look like a cartoon monster. It looks like a human body but corrupted. Now, let's move into the psychological dimension. One obvious lens is dissociation, the feeling of being split from yourself. The multiple faces suggest multiple states of mind layered on top of each other. The subject is not simply sad or afraid. They are overwhelmed by so many conflicting emotions that their very sense of self is torn apart. The open mouths can be seen as intrusive thoughts, anxiety, or rage, not just present, but physically tearing the person apart. Another interpretation could be trauma. Trauma often doesn't appear in a neat, linear way. It returns in flashes, fragments, intrusive images. In this painting, those fragments become literal pieces of flesh, pushing through the surface. The protective dome around the head might represent coping mechanisms, denial, emotional distance, dissociation, that eventually crack under pressure. The result isn't calm healing, but chaotic collapse. It's a terrifying but honest picture of what it can feel like when the mind finally breaks. The title is our last big clue, story twist. A twist in a story is the moment when everything you thought you knew suddenly changes. The hero becomes the villain, the victim becomes the threat, the safe space becomes the danger. This painting can be read as exactly that kind of twist, but on the level of identity. On the outside, the story of this person might have looked simple, a body that appears calm, hands folded, head bowed. From a distance, a fragile, maybe even gentle soul. But inside, a completely different story was unfolding, a horror story. The twist is that the real monster was never out there. It was always in here, inside the subject's mind. You could imagine this as the final frame of a psychological horror film. The moment when the audience realizes this wasn't about something attacking them from the outside. It was about them losing themselves from within. But what really makes this painting so effective is that it doesn't explain itself. The artist doesn't give us a clear message like, this painting is about X, or this symbolizes Y. Instead, the artwork functions like a mirror, but a distorted one. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by your own thoughts, if you've ever been scared of losing control, if you've watched someone you love change into someone you barely recognize, then this painting presses directly on those nerves. So after all of this, what are we actually looking at? Is this a person consumed by their inner demons? A visual metaphor for mental illness, A religious icon that's been corrupted and abandoned, or simply a nightmare given form, meant to disturb without a single fixed meaning? The artist doesn't tell us, and maybe that's the point. Art, like Story Twist, doesn't offer answers. It offers a space for us to confront our own fears, our own thoughts, our own vulnerabilities. Now, I want to hear from you. When you look at this painting, what's the first emotion you feel? Let me know your interpretation in the comments. And if you want to explore more dark, unsettling, and emotionally heavy artworks with me, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.